Black Sabbath invented metal, what are the other genres that Black Sabbath spawned? Well, they definitely spawned thrash metal, no question about it.
When Rick Beato pressed record that day, the world was already mourning. Ozzy Osbourne, the man who practically invented heavy metal, had taken his final bow. For millions, this wasn't just the end of a life, it was the end of an era. Rick didn't open with tears or headlines. He opened with music. The haunting riff of Into the Void filled his studio, echoing through the same amps Tony Iommi once used, the same tone that shook the foundations of rock over 50 years ago. And as those first notes rang out, you could feel it. This wasn't a reaction or a memorial stream. It was something deeper, a tribute from one musician to another, from someone who understood that behind the Prince of Darkness was a man who changed everything about how we hear guitars, melodies, even emotion itself.
Figured there's a better way that I could honor the people, and that's by talking about their music. Now, Ozzy, as a singer, now his solo career is a whole separate thing for another video, but with Black Sabbath, does Ozzy's voice sound like anyone?
Rick's approach was simple yet powerful. Instead of talking about Ozzy's death, he chose to celebrate his sound, the sound that launched generations of musicians and still vibrates in every riff, every stage dive, every scream that dares to call itself metal. But as the world replayed those Sabbath classics and tributes poured in, one question lingered. How did Ozzy's final chapter really unfold? And what Rick revealed next would show a side of Ozzy few ever truly understood.
I mean, he really had an incredibly original voice. The tone, the kinds of melodies that he sang.
People think I'm insane because I am drowning over time.
In the years leading up to his passing, Ozzy's body began to betray the man who once seemed unstoppable. Decades of chaos, injury, and pure adrenaline had finally caught up with him. He battled Parkinson's disease, underwent multiple surgeries, and even suffered a devastating spinal injury that left him struggling to stand for long. For someone who'd spent his life commanding stages and crowds, it was like being trapped in a body that could no longer contain the fire inside. But Ozzy never lost his sense of dark humor or his brutal honesty.
I don't know if there's really anything more that I can add that wasn't said during the memorial show that Ozzy did while he was there.
In his final memoir, Last Rites, released just months before his death, he peeled back the curtain on those final years. He spoke about the quiet moments that haunted him, the silence after the crowds were gone, the late-night thoughts about mortality, and the painful realization that even legends have limits. He admitted that fear had always been part of his life, not fear of fame or the stage, but of stopping, of what would happen when the music finally did fade. Yet what made Ozzy different was that he never stopped trying to live louder than his pain. Even as he faced health scares and endless hospital visits, he returned to the studio, determined to keep creating. His wife Sharon later said he didn't want to die being remembered for being sick. He wanted to die being remembered for the noise he made, and that's exactly what he did. His final songs weren't just music, they were confessions. The sound of a man staring down mortality and laughing in its face. But before that final goodbye, Ozzy had one more thing to do, a moment that would bring his story full circle. When Ozzy Osbourne walked onto that Birmingham stage for the final time, it wasn't just another concert, it was a full circle moment, 50 years in the making. The crowd wasn't there to see a rock star. They were there to witness history. The air was heavy with nostalgia, pride, and the bittersweet awareness that this was it, the last time the godfathers of heavy metal would stand together under the same lights. Rick Beato captured that feeling perfectly in his tribute. Instead of mourning, he celebrated the energy that Ozzy radiated, even in his final performances. You could see it in the footage, the way Ozzy smiled, the way he struggled but refused to let weakness define him. His voice, though aged and cracked, still carried the same haunting tone that once shook the world. Each lyric hit differently now. When he sang, "I'm going through changes," it felt like a farewell letter, not just to fans, but to the life he'd lived louder than anyone else ever could. Behind him, Tony Iommi's guitar roared through the amps, a sound that had once fans, terrified parents, and inspired generations. It was poetic, the same duo that started it all in the smoky clubs of Birmingham, closing the curtain in the very city where the legend began. For the fans who grew up with Sabbath, it was emotional closure. But for Ozzy, it was something deeper, a spiritual homecoming. After years of chaos, fame, and controversy, he got to say goodbye his way, surrounded by the band that built an empire of sound. But once the lights went out and the amps went silent, the noise didn't stop, because what came next would spark controversy across the entire music world. No sooner had the final chords faded than the internet exploded. Tributes poured in from every corner of the world. Musicians, fans, even political figures shared memories of the man who gave heavy metal its soul.
Right next to the camera, Tom, if you will, is my Black Sabbath poster with a young Ozzy, a whole young band, behind the screen that I look at all day long when I'm working on videos.
But in the middle of the love and respect came something stranger: chaos. Within days, AI-generated new Ozzy songs began circulating online, fake tracks claiming to feature his unreleased vocals. Some fans were fooled, others were furious. The idea that technology was trying to resurrect Ozzy so soon after his passing sparked a massive debate about the digital afterlife of artists. Rick Beato touched on this too, how the industry sometimes blurs the line between honoring a legacy and exploiting it. It was a discussion that hit close to home, because while fans were still grieving, algorithms were already remixing his voice, turning a human legacy into digital content. To make things worse, tabloids began pushing wild rumors, talk of secret recordings, false claims about deathbed confessions, and even a fabricated story about a so-called suicide pact with Sharon. The Osbourne family quickly shut it down, with Kelly Osbourne publicly calling the reports heartless garbage. But it showed just how distorted the truth can become when fame and mortality collide. Still, through all the noise, one thing stood out: genuine love. Fans around the world created real tributes, not AI copies, but raw human performances. Guitarists replayed Sabbath classics, singers covered War Pigs in candlelit rooms, and entire festivals turned into impromptu memorials. It wasn't about technology or tabloids. It was about emotion, about what Ozzy meant. And maybe that's the most powerful thing, because Ozzy's legacy isn't trapped in rumors or AI. It's written into the DNA of modern music itself. Ozzy Osbourne didn't just create heavy metal, he defined it. With Black Sabbath, he and Tony Iommi shaped a sound that didn't exist before. Dark, heavy, and unapologetically raw. Songs like Paranoid, War Pigs, and Into the Void became blueprints for generations of musicians. Their riffs turned rebellion into an art form. From thrash to grunge, nearly every modern rock genre carries Sabbath's fingerprints. Metallica, Slayer, Soundgarden, even Alice in Chains all trace their DNA back to those early Sabbath records. Rick Beato summed it up perfectly. Black Sabbath didn't just influence music, they built a language that every heavy band still speaks today. And through it all, Ozzy remained the beating heart, imperfect, unpredictable, and undeniably real. But behind that wild energy and immortal voice, there was a man with regrets, fears, and stories few ever got to hear. Behind the chaos, the fame, and the outrageous headlines, Ozzy Osbourne was a man full of contradictions. In Last Rites, he opened up about things he'd kept buried for decades: the regrets, the broken friendships, the business mistakes that nearly cost him everything. He admitted he was never the mastermind behind the contracts or the money. He was the guy who just wanted to make music, even when the world around him turned it into an industry. There were tender moments too. Memories of his kids, quiet nights with Sharon when the cameras were gone, and the weight of knowing that his body was failing long before his spirit ever would. One of the most striking confessions in his memoir was his fear of being forgotten, not as the Prince of Darkness, but as Ozzy, the working-class kid from Birmingham who somehow changed the sound of the world. Rick Beato's tribute caught that essence perfectly. Between the riffs and analysis, there was reverence, not for the celebrity, but for the artist. Because when you strip away the myth, what's left is a man who gave everything to music and asked for nothing but a chance to keep playing. And that's what makes his story timeless. Not the fame or the madness, but the way his music refuses to die. In the end, Rick Beato's tribute wasn't just about more mourning Ozzy Osbourne. It was about celebrating what he gave the world. ... Few artists have managed to bridge generations the way Ozzy did, from the haunting darkness of Black Sabbath to the wild energy of his solo career. His voice became the heartbeat of an entire culture. He proved that music could be raw, ugly, and beautiful all at once. That imperfection could be power. Ozzy's legacy isn't trapped in old records or viral clips. It lives on every time a teenager plugs in their first guitar. Every time someone hears that heavy riff and feels something wake up inside them. He didn't just make metal louder, he made it human. Rick's way of honoring him showed that the best tribute isn't a speech or a stream. It's a song played with honesty and heart. Because as long as the world keeps turning up those Sabbath riffs, Ozzy Osbourne will never really be gone. If you grew up with Sabbath, or if Ozzy's music ever got you through something dark, share your story. That's how his legacy lives on. Rick Beato closed his tribute the only way he knew how, with gratitude. No drama, no clickbait, just genuine respect for a man who changed everything. He looked into the camera, surrounded by his guitars and that iconic Black Sabbath poster on the wall, and said it plainly: there will never be another Ozzy. Then he picked up his guitar and let the music do the talking. A final riff that seemed to hang in the air, heavy and haunting, like Ozzy's spirit was still in the room. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a reminder that great music outlives us all. So if Ozzy's voice ever meant something to you, if Paranoid blasted through your headphones on a bad day, or War Pigs made you pick up a guitar, keep that alive. Share it, play it, pass it on, because legends don't fade when the lights go out. They echo forever. Rest easy, Ozzy. The music's still loud, just the way you'd want it.